Pope Leo XIV stopped at the Iron Gate when he saw 4 elderly nuns being turned away from the beachfront mansion their own money had helped buy. Behind them, waiters were setting 40 crystal glasses for a dinner Bishop Adrian Vale claimed would secure the deceased's future. Sister Agnes Delaney held a small brass key in her palm. It was dark with age and tied to a wooden tag bearing one faded word, home. A security guard apologized. The bishop's office had ordered that no former convent residents enter before the donors arrived. Dinner began in 23 minutes. Cameras were already at the drive. Sister Agnes did not argue. She closed her fingers around the key and said, "We only came for our bell." That sentence made the Pope turn. The 86-year-old nun explained that their old convent bell had been stored inside after the convent was sold. For 60 years, it had called the sisters to prayer, meals, and the bedsides of dying strangers. They had been promised its return before demolition. It never was. Bishop Vale appeared on the front steps with a controlled smile. He was 67, polished and respected across Florida for raising money without seeming to ask. He greeted Pope Leo XIV warmly, then looked past him toward the sisters. "There has been a misunderstanding," he said. "Tonight's event is highly structured." The Pope glanced at the 4 women outside the gate and then at the 40 empty glasses inside. "What is being protected from them?" he asked. The bishop's smile tightened. "The dignity of the occasion." Sister Agnes immediately defended him. She said they should leave. She said they had not wanted to embarrass anyone. Sister Margaret was blind and leaned on Agnes's arm. Another carried an inhaler and a cardigan repaired at both elbows. Pope Leo XIV opened the gate himself. He ignored the banquet hall and followed the nuns toward a service corridor. There, beside crates of imported wine, stood 6 wooden boxes marked property of St. Anne's Convent. The largest box was empty. The old bell was missing. Bishop Vale arrived behind them and said it had probably been moved during renovations. He promised to locate it after the dinner. The Pope looked again at the brass key in Sister Agnes's hand. "What did this key open?" he asked. "Our front door," she said. "Before we gave it away." She corrected herself at once. "Before we were asked to give it away." The distinction was small, but Pope Leo XIV heard it, and with 19 minutes left before the bishop was due to announce the sale of another portion of church property, the Pope asked for the complete file on St. Anne's Convent. Bishop Vale replied that the file was in the diocese office miles away. A woman standing near the service entrance lowered her eyes. Her name was Elena Ruiz, and she worked in diagnosis and finance. The Pope noticed that she was holding a folder against her chest so tightly that its corner had bent. "What is in your hands?" he asked. Elena looked at the bishop, then she looked at the 4 nuns. "Copies?" she said. Bishop Adrian. Vale took the Pope into his private study before the donors saw that anything was wrong. The study faced the ocean. Its walls displayed schools, clinics, and hurricane shelters financed during Vale's tenure. He had balanced a failing budget and reopened 2 parishes. He was competent, respected, and certain his results justified his methods. His defense was calm. "We did what was prudent. St. Anne's Convent," he explained, had become too expensive. Its roof and plumbing failed. The sisters were aging, and no new woman had joined in. Music, 11 years. Selling seemed inevitable. The convent brought in a little more than $12 million. The mansion cost $9,200,000 before renovations. That number pair changed the room. Vale insisted Stella Maris was not private. A diocesan foundation owned it for retreats, donors, and visiting clergy. He occupied one wing because the old residence had been sold. "The house creates relationships," he said. "Relationships create donations. Donations protect ministries." Pope Leo XIV asked one question: which ministry protects the sisters? Vale answered that they lived in a former seminary with meals, transportation, and medical supervision. It was not luxurious, but it was safe. Elena opened her folder. The seminary had filed 7 air conditioning complaints in 18 months. 2 rooms were closed for mold. The sisters shared 1 accessible shower. Their roof request had been deferred 3 times. The imported stone around the mansion's pool had cost more than every repair approved for the sisters. Vale removed his glasses and cleaned them slowly. "Optics can be misleading," he said. Elena then placed a copy of the sale agreement on the desk. The sisters had signed a document transferring the convent to the diocese. The final page stated that all proceeds could be used for general diagnosis and development. Sister Agnes's name appeared first. Her signature was followed by 39 others. The Pope asked why Elena carried copies. The originals, she said, had been removed from storage that morning by the bishop's legal office. Vale's voice hardened for the first time. Elena had violated internal procedure. Financial files could not be carried into a public event without authorization. "We did what was prudent," he repeated. The Pope did not answer. He asked for the sisters' living address. Vale offered to arrange a visit the following week. The Pope stood. No, tonight. The bishop reminded him that 40 donors had already arrived, and in less than 10 minutes he was scheduled to announce a partnership with a hotel company. The agreement would sell the southern garden and the old guest house for another $6 million. Pope Leo XIV looked through the window. Below them, a worker was removing a small metal plaque from the garden wall before the guests entered. It bore the emblem of St. Anne, an open book beneath a lamp. The Pope asked why a convent symbol was attached to the mansion. Vale said it had probably arrived with the stored furniture, but Sister Agnes had described the same emblem on the old bell. The Pope walked downstairs and stopped the worker. On the back of the plaque were 40 engraved names, not donors, nuns. The oldest names had been worn almost smooth. Vale reached the garden as guests took their seats. That plaque is not part of tonight's program, he said. Pope Leo XIV handed it to Sister Agnes. Then tonight's program is incomplete. The bishop believed the matter could still be controlled. He ordered dinner delayed for 15 minutes and told the donors there was a minor pastoral concern. But the Pope had noticed what no one else had. The plaque was not decorated. It had once been fixed to something built for the sisters, and Elena knew exactly what that something was. The old seminary stood 70 stirrers inland behind a closed parish school. Pope Leo XIV arrived after dark with Agnes, Elena, and Vale. At the mansion, dinner waited and the hotel agreement remained unsigned. 40 hooks lined the entrance wall. Only 12 held coats. The rest held grocery bags, oxygen tubes, rosaries, and medical reminders. Above the elevator, a sign read, "Out of order again." 5 sisters could not reach their upstairs rooms. Sister Rose, once a charity nurse, slept in a converted office. Boxes beneath her bed held bandages, soap, and soup. She still gave poor families on Thursdays. "I know we are retired," she said. "People still get hungry." In the dining room, Sister Margaret sat beside a portable fan. She recognized the Pope's voice, then reached for the edge of the table to stand. Pope Leo XIV asked her to remain seated. The room was too warm. A folded napkin stopped her sweating glass from slipping beneath her shaking hand. The sisters did not complain about the mansion. That made the mansion harder to defend. They mentioned only small things, a bathroom door that would not close, 3 missed hospital trips, and a broken chapel microphone. Sister Agnes still set out, 41 cups every morning. The extra cup had once belonged to any stranger who came to the convent door. At the seminary, strangers were not permitted inside without written approval. Bishop Vale said safety regulations required it. Sister Agnes nodded as though she had been corrected. "Of course," she said. "We must not become trouble." The Pope saw that the brass key was still in her hand. He asked why she carried it after 7 years. She said it was foolish. She had kept it because the sisters were promised a new residence called St. Anne's house. They were told the old key would be placed beside the new front door during the dedication. No dedication had occurred. No new residence had been built. Elena opened a second file. 7 years earlier, plans had been approved for a 40-room retirement home with a chapel, infirmary courtyard, and bell tower. The plaque of 40 names belonged at its entrance. The project had a name, Stella Maris House. The Pope looked at Bishop Vale. The mansion had not merely used the sisters' money. On paper, it had first been their future home. Then the project address changed from inland property to the beachfront estate. Vale said the foundation had altered the plan when costs increased. A coastal property, he argued, could appreciate in value and produce donor revenue. The sisters had been moved to a building the Daces already owned. No one was abandoned. He said they were accommodated. Sister Miriam entered carrying a cloth sewing case. She was 79 and had once kept the convent accounts. Her hands shook so badly that Elena helped her set the case on the table. Inside were carbon copies of the pages the sisters had signed. The final page was different. Their version required all proceeds from the convent sale to provide housing and medical care for the sisters for the rest of their lives. It did not authorize general diocesan development. Miriam had kept the copies after the deceased, once lost 3 teachers' payroll records. She trusted sewing cases more than filing cabinets. The forged page had not been added by a stranger. A typed memorandum attached to it carried Bishop Vale's initials and an instruction to regularize the consent language before closing. The bishop stared at those words for a long time. Then he said the legal office had prepared hundreds of pages. He could not be expected to remember every revision. Sister Agnes tried to help him. Perhaps he did not understand what they changed. Pope Leo XIV answered quietly. That may be true, but he used what they changed. If this story brings to mind someone whose years of service were quietly erased, write their name in the comments and let that name be remembered. The Pope then asked Sister Agnes how she knew Bishop Vale before he became a priest. She looked toward him, not wanting to answer. Vale told her not to. That was the first moment he appeared afraid. Sister Agnes removed a faded photograph. A teenage boy in a borrowed jacket stood beside his mother Maria in the convent kitchen. She had washed dishes there after her husband disappeared. The boy was Adrian. The sisters fed him after school. Margaret taught him music. Miriam bought his books. Agnes persuaded the community to pay his first seminary bill. When Maria became ill, the brass key had opened the door he entered every afternoon. Bishop Vale had not taken a house from strangers. He had taken it from the women who had once made room for him. The Pope asked why he had hidden that connection. Vale looked at the broken elevator sign, the portable fan, and the photograph of his mother wearing a stained apron. He said nothing. The truth came from Elena. 3 months earlier, the bishop had ordered all St. Anne's records removed from the mansion before the hotel partnership was announced. He feared donors would discover that the estate had been financed by a retirement fund. The old bell was scheduled to be melted down the next morning because its inscription named the sisters. The clock had not been the dinner, it was the bell. At 8 the next morning, a salvage company would collect it from a warehouse near the marina. Pope Leo XIV stood. "Bring me the key," he said. Sister Agnes offered him the brass key. He closed her fingers around it. "Not that one," he said. The key to the warehouse. At 7:30 the next morning, donors, board members, clergy, and all 40 sisters were summoned to Stella Maris House. In the center of the ballroom stood the old convent bell. Its bronze was scratched. Around its base ran 40 names and one sentence for those who opened the door. The salvage truck waited outside. Bishop Vale entered through the side door. He had not slept. His public announcement remained unsigned on the banquet table beside untouched crystal glasses from the night before. Pope Leo XIV stood next to the bell and asked Elena to read the original covenant. She read only the necessary lines. The sisters' property was to support their housing, medical care, and spiritual life. No sale could remove that obligation. No later board could erase it. Vale stepped forward. He called the mansion an investment, not an indulgence. Its value and donations had grown. Reversing the course, he warned, could harm schools and shelters. We did what was prudent. The Pope placed the plaque of 40 names against the bell. Then he asked one question. Prudent for whom? Vale began to list programs. The Pope asked again. For whom? No one answered. Sister Agnes stood at the edge of the ballroom, still holding the old key. She said the sisters did not need the mansion. They had taken vows of poverty. They did not want parishes to lose help because of them. Her voice was steady until she added one small sentence. We only wanted not to be sent away. The bishop looked down. Pope Leo XIV did not condemn wealth in the speech. He changed the room. He asked the waiters to remove the donor place cards from the long table. Then he invited all 40 sisters to sit. Some resisted and looked to Agnes. Sister Margaret touched the chair before lowering herself. Only after every nun was seated did the Pope address Bishop Vale. The estate belonged to a diocesan foundation, not Vale. Its board was suspended, the hotel sale canceled, and an independent administrator placed in control. Vale was removed from all financial authority pending a canonical investigation and civil review of the altered documents. He would leave the residential wing that day. The mansion would be returned to the purpose under which it had first been approved. It would become a permanent home for the 40 sisters. The ballroom would serve as a community hall, the guest house as an infirmary, and the private study as a clinic. The garden would open twice weekly to isolated seniors. The bishop's luxury vehicles, wine collection, and furnishings purchased by the foundation would be sold. The proceeds would repair the old seminary and fund transportation for retired religious across the fasces. Vale said the Pope was turning a complex institution into a symbol. Pope Leo XIV looked at the bell. No, he said. You turned 40 women into a line in a budget. I'm returning their names. He then handed Bishop Vale the warehouse release order. Vale did not understand. The Pope told him the bell had been saved only because Elena reached the warehouse 7 minutes before the salvage crew. But saving it was not enough. The man who ordered its removal would carry it back to the place of honor. In full view of the board and donors, Bishop Vale removed his jacket and took hold of one side of the wooden support. 2 workers lifted the other. He carried the bell from the ballroom to the front courtyard. The walk was less than $100. It seemed longer. At the entrance, the Pope asked Sister Agnes for her brass key. He placed it inside a new glass case beside the door. Beneath it, he ordered a simple inscription. This key once opened a home that fed a future bishop. Then he turned to the veil. The bishop finally spoke without procedure. He admitted remembering the kitchen, free meals, and seminary bill. He had spent years escaping the shame of needing charity. The sisters who remembered his poverty began to feel like witnesses against the man he wanted to become. He had called distance prudence. He had called it a gratitude sentiment. He had called their home an asset. Sister Agnes did not excuse him. She took an old rosary from her pocket. It had belonged to Maria Vale, the bishop's mother. Agnes had kept it after Maria died because Adrian had been away at seminary. She placed it in his hand. "Your mother was never ashamed of being poor," she said, "only taking more than she could return." Vale's fingers closed around the rosary. Vale would spend the first stage of his suspension at a rural house, serving retired priests and sisters. Under supervision, he would work in its kitchen and transportation office while the investigation continued. It was not a theatrical punishment. It was a return to the kind of service he had learned to hide. Then the Pope gave Sister Agnes 40 new keys. Each bore one sister's name. Agnes counted twice. At 40, she looked across the table at women who had spent their lives opening doors for others. Pope Leo XIV said, "This house was never taken from a bishop today. It was returned to its owners." The sisters entered their rooms slowly. Sister Rose chose the smallest room because it was closest to the kitchen. Sister Miriam asked for a desk large enough to keep proper records. Sister Margaret stood on the balcony and listened to the ocean she could not see. In the courtyard, Bishop Vale pulled the bell rope. The first strike was uneven. The second carried over the garden. On the third, the sisters began to pray. Months later, Stella Maris no longer looked like a bishop's retreat. The long table held pill organizers, knitting, birthday cards, and Agnes's 41st cup for any stranger. The wine room stored canned food. The terrace welcomed widows on Tuesdays and veterans on Fridays. Above the entrance hung the convent bell. Beneath it, behind glass, rested the old brass key marked home. Every evening, one sister rang the bell before supper. The sound traveled across the same beach where powerful guests had once arrived without knowing who had paid for the view. Sister Agnes always left the front door unlocked until the final echo faded. Because a house becomes holy, not when important people enter it, but when the forgotten discover that someone saved them a place.